It wasn't the promise of utopia and the lush green expanses they were to know. It was a secret, kept guarded from prying eyes. Come to Hanford, my boy, with victory and great too as the prize. So they came from all corners of the country without a need for a reason of their chore. After all, it was for the good of their country and the means to end the war. With dust a-flaring and heat a-blaring, they toiled under the desert sun. Each day the community grew until the newspapers cried they'd won. Then as quick as the winds and the tumbleweeds blew, the town and the workers were gone. For the job was done, at least for the moment, and it was time to settle or move on. The barracks, the bunkers, the trailers, the lines, nothing was left but the dust. Yet on any clear night, as the wind blows, listen, for you may hear it call. Hanford or bust.
The cherry blossoms had fallen earlier in the month, and talk of this year's harvest filled the small town. Pop English's drugstore was a welcome stop for the area children, happily purchasing a bottle of Orange Crush before making their way home for evening chores. Orchards stretched to the Columbia River, and the chalk-white cliffs signaled to travelers that home was nearby. It was as if Norman Rockwell himself had used the small town of White Bluffs for his inspiration of Americana. But the future of White Bluffs and its neighboring town of Hanford was far from serene. It was March 1943, and 1,500 landowners found their lives turned upside down as letters of condemnation ordered them to evacuate their homes, no questions asked. Their eastern Washington utopia was needed for a top-secret government project essential to the war effort. Residents of White Bluffs, Hanford, the town of Richland, and even a tribe of Wanapum Indians were evicted in the name of the Manhattan Project. Most residents had 30 days, some as few as 2, to pack up their households and find other accommodations beyond the boundaries of the newly established Hanford Works Project. At first, many residents fought back, refusing to leave the land they had worked so hard to develop. But in the end, only the tumbleweeds were allowed to remain. It was only months earlier that a small group of men, led by Lieutenant Colonel Franklin Matthias, had surveyed the area and found it suitable as a place to support the construction and operation of a plutonium processing plant, the substance needed in the assembly of a nuclear bomb. It was the abundance of water, the vast open spaces, and the availability of inexpensive energy that attracted the men from the Manhattan Project. Colonel Matthias was chosen to oversee the Hanford Works Project, an endeavor that would turn the tiny town of Hanford into a camp that would soon accommodate more than 50,000 people.
They came for the water, they came for the land, they came for my home on which it would stand. It was for the war effort, or so they would say. No choice could be made, they would not let us stay. The bulldozers came, the crops went down. Barely a memory was left in Hanford town. No time for regret. Now lift up your chin, for it's the war we go, boy, and the war we will win.
It was determined that a temporary camp was all that was needed. The only permanent structures were to be the processing and production plants. Barracks were built for the men and women who streamed into Hanford with promises of high-paying wages. They were segregated by gender and race, with the women's camp under 24-hour guard. Smitten couples were reduced to holding hands between the fences. Those lucky enough to bring their home in tow or to rent one of the few government trailers available found cozy, or to most, cramped accommodations at the Hanford Trailer Park.
And apparently it was started actually before the people in the Hanford town site even knew what was happening. There was survey work and things going on. I imagine there was some pretty interesting speculation at that point what was happening.
But little did we ever know or realize what we were at the beginning of. Had no idea. Well, we knew those people were leaving. Yes, we did. Because there were some houses where the people had already gone. And like I said, their chickens were running in the front yard. There were kids' tricycles and wagons in the front yard, and the houses were empty.
But the amazing thing to me is between the construction camp, or for the workers, both the single, male and female, and the families, they created this 51,000 person city with essentially all the services you need to keep that many people reasonably healthy and comfortable, in a wartime situation.
So you saw every kind of trailer you could think of. In those days, trailers were built like for recreation purposes, and somebody got onto this construction whatever and epidemic and started building trailers that people bought and moved out here.
Some of them were manufactured trailers, and some of them were homemade trailers because, a lot of people, everybody wanted their family there, and that was the only way they could have their family there because they were just building Richland, and so there wasn't any housing there at that time.
These tiny trailers provided the only equivalent of normal family life in construction camp. Families who lived in the trailers had the reputation of being the most stable in camp. Other camp occupants seemed to line up for their final paycheck every time the wind blew. The conditions were demoralizing: scorching heat, blowing dust, and long and arduous work hours. But the workers knew they were there for a purpose. It was a project to help win the war. Even though only a tiny select few knew they were actually building at this top-secret government project. The Hanford camp was a place kept so secret that even the amount of beer consumed by its residents couldn't be disclosed for security reasons. Speculations abound, as most deduced it was a poisonous gas plant, or perhaps a sandpaper factory, since it seemed sand was in abundance.
One thing that we all had in common at Hanford was built into us from day one was security.
Oh, yeah.
And everywhere you turned, they'd have different logos and signs. And we didn't know what was going on, but we were warned not to talk about it. If anybody asks you, what do you do in Hanford? Well, I don't know, just work.
Nobody knew what to say anyway because it was so hush.
No one
Nobody knew.
It was just such a different thing. Of course, I come from Tacoma, and it's crowded in Tacoma, but then there was streets and sidewalks and everything, and there wasn't. And they had some boardwalks down like in front of the stores, but there wasn't sidewalks. And the buses ran all the time. The buses kind of ran in a circle all the time, and then the trailer camp was on one side, the barracks were over on the other side, and then sort of in between was where the commissary was. Well, we all wondered what we were doing, but we were told by the government, this is for the good of the country, and we were all for the good of the country, and so we were willing to do it.
The trailer park itself was set up as a fully functional city. At its peak, it boasted more than 13,000 residents. Each camper was provided a 40-foot by 40-foot, or, depending upon location, a 25-foot by 40-foot lot. Each lot was equipped with a water faucet, a wooden canopy to help curb the heat, a sewer line to dispose of wastewater, and one electrical connection. A modern bathhouse containing men's and women's sections was available for every 30 trailers. These were equipped with lavatories, toilets, shower rooms, and a laundry room with 4 washtubs. The rooms were in constant use and became the social gathering place for residents. Since trailers were too small for entertaining, block parties were held in the laundry rooms, or electric washers served as tables for potluck dishes.
It was like living in a big walk-in closet. I converted a bedroom to a closet in my house. And I've got California closet shelves up one side for shoes and all that stuff. And I've got more room in there, I think, than we had in that trailer. I kid you not.
The social life was at the washroom. That's where the bulletin board was, and it was just the only place there was to hang out for the kids, especially. You know, my sister, that was the one thing my sister and brother both mentioned, was that they hung out at the washroom. And not to wash, it was just to hang out. There was some place that was covered, you know, that you could get in out of the wind and rain and so forth.
The trailer people, I think, adapted to life around here really easy. I'm not really sure why, but I think they did better than the other people that moved into a house right away. It was really tough on women around here. It was real hot, and there wasn't air conditioning in those days. So it was generally the woman's idea to move out of town. In a lot of cases, the men were willing to put up with the misery because the money was good. But some of the life was so tough that the women, they didn't want to put up with it. And so, if you want to be married with me, we're leaving right now. So.
People came from every state in search of work. Most were unprepared for the desert conditions, for the secrecy, the lines, the heat and dust made family life far from the ordinary. A walk through the streets read like a history lesson. Streets were named for U.S. generals, including Doolittle and Eisenhower, and places and names in the news, such as Bataan and Guadalcanal. 2 grocery stores, 4 ice houses, a lumber yard, 2 automobile service stations, an electrical fix-it shop, and even a dog pound were set up to service this trailer city. A schoolhouse and gymnasium for children up to 8th grade were located in the main camp area. High school students were furnished free bus transportation to neighboring Richland. All needs were factored in, including 24-hour patrol duty, public health services, fire protection rights, surface streets, 24-hour cafeterias, and weekly entertainment. All part of the critical morale effort, as worker turnover was constant.
Well, it was interesting. And then we kept saying, well, we're not going to be here very long, and this will be fine. But it was kind of fun, really. Everybody was in the same boat.
You develop routines and that were beneficial to the family. And you were responsible to do certain things, and you just did them, and that made life easy for everybody. To give you an example of what I'm talking about is, they used to have what they called the porcelain bucket brigade, and that was a chamber pot. So none of the trailers had bathrooms, and even if they did, they had no hookup for the bathroom. They did have a hookup for your sink to take gray water, but they had nothing for sanitary. So you had to utilize the washrooms where the bathroom facilities were located. And so in the morning, you would see all the ladies headed for the wash house with this porcelain bucket to dump it and wash it out and bring it back to the trailer. Well, that was, in the early days, that was the only women did that. Then finally, I don't know, somebody spotted a man doing one, and pretty soon the wives were beating on their husbands, so then it became anybody's job. And then it finally got down to us kids were doing it. And so in the morning, that was my brother and I's job too. One of us had to take the porcelain pot over and dump it and wash it out and bring it back.
Well, I suppose we had to get up early and have breakfast, because then my brother and sister took the bus to school in Richland, and it was 26 miles round trip to school in Richland, and they were both still in school. I was out of school, but they were both still in school. And of course then my mom and I would do the washing and go and do the shopping and do the standing in line bit. One of us would stand in one line and one another line, and so that we could get it done faster.
Men would line up for a city block, standing in line to get to the drugstore, and I think we had about 20, maybe 20 seats. And it was a long
bar.
Long bar. You call it, is that a bar?
I guess it was
about 20,
counter.
maybe more. And then they'd stand behind a seat and be 14, 15 people deep. So there were 300 people there waiting to get a dish of ice cream at one time.
8,000 new faces show up every day. Over half take one look, then go on their way. From 1 to 2 weeks is the average we know. The weak ones turn chicken, the strong make the dough. A transfusion of dust about twice a day drives all honest thoughts of staying away. You spend a hard day in clearing your slate. You cuss and you damn, then terminate.
Trailerites took great pride in their tiny lots. Seeds and hoses were provided to tie down the desert soil with gardens and flowers. Many adorned their lots with picket fences and rock pathways. Trailers were too small and too hot for long periods of occupancy. Residents spilled into the streets to discuss the day's events with neighbors, while carefully choosing their words, since you never know who may be listening. Children found ways to entertain themselves. Many young entrepreneurs shined shoes or sold soda pop to thirsty workers as they left their shifts.
And they did it right where the guys got off the buses and sold these cold pops just as fast as they could. We had stacks and stacks of Coke bottles empty, and they'd load them up and take them back and get more. And it was constant, almost, every day. And every day these kids were, I don't know what they charged, but it was like double what it should have been at that time, or maybe triple.
And I delivered papers into the trailers, and then I gave that up, and I took a job selling papers in the mess hall. And that was really a lucrative job, or I thought it was. I was just a kid, but newspapers in those days were only nickel a piece, and almost every worker gave me at least a dime. And a few people made a deal with me ahead of time that they said, "You always have a paper for me to sit down at the table and read while I eat. You do that, I'll give you a quarter every day." And so I made a quarter off the paper, and a lot of those guys were really nice. They would be very careful about how they read the paper. They would carefully read it, and they would put it back together, and then when they on their way out, they would give it back to me, and then I'd resell it.
Food was probably one of the largest morale boosters, and food was plentiful. 8 24-hour mess halls were open for camp and construction residents. 25 million meals were served through these mess halls, with the equivalency of 50 tons of food per meal. Entertainment was always available. A movie house ran 24 hours a day, and top-name bands such as Kay Kaiser performed regularly. Entertainers were generally brought in and out of the camp at night, so they didn't get much of an idea of the kind of place they had visited and its location. A baseball field, skating rink, billiard room, dance hall, and library were available to keep the residents' minds occupied on recreation, and not on the concrete structures that were rising quickly above the desert landscape.
They provided a lot of inducement to get people to come here.
Because they didn't want people to leave. Because I know my husband said that he wanted to leave a lot of times before he met me because he just got so lonesome.
They realized after they got started in construction, they were losing a lot of people, leaving again. I guess the estimate is something like 151,000 people cycled through the place. And so they realized it was a valued added expenditure to build the auditorium and build the theater, so they would have people stay long enough to finish the place.
Oh, everybody had the same thing. Everybody came from somewhere. And the first thing you always ask was kind of like everybody does today. Well, where are you from? Like, nobody was ever from here.
You had to meet people, and of course everybody else was in the same boat, because everybody else was coming from somewhere. And there's a few people that were home that grew up in the state of Washington, but not very many.
Secrecy reigned supreme. All mail and phone transmissions in and out of the camp were monitored. Supervisors stressed to workers the importance of their mission while not knowing themselves what the mission was. But the workers kept coming, the camp kept growing, and the lines never seemed to stop. By February 1945, when main construction was completed, over 250,000 people had made their way through the gates of Hanford. Most packed up and moved out of state. The workers that were to remain were relocated in the government-built town of Richland. The trailers scattered and the bulldozers returned to hide the remnants of what had been in the desert sand.
By February 22nd of 45, the camp was, I can't say abandoned, they moved everyone out. That coincided with the F reactor, which was 7 miles up the river, going critical. And they had a safety law there that nobody could live that close to an active reactor. So at that point, the construction actually was winding down, and they moved people into Richland, or people just moved on to other jobs.
By the time we left, it was getting pretty well, the camp was pretty well emptied out, and there really weren't too many trailers. We were virtually some of the very last ones there. I thought it was so big I had a boyfriend. And it was so sad that day. It was on a Sunday, and his folks pulled out before we did. I was brokenhearted. I can remember that day so well.
A short time ago, an American airplane dropped one bomb on Hiroshima and destroyed its usefulness to the enemy.
We have used it in order to shorten the agony of war, in order to save the lives of thousands and thousands of young Americans.
On August 9th, 1945, Hanford's contribution to the war effort became apparent when newspapers announced the bombing of Nagasaki, Japan. Only 3 days earlier, the devastation of Hiroshima revealed the nuclear secret to the world. Reporters quickly flocked to Hanford to get a glimpse of this secret camp. But beyond the barricaded area were nothing more than a few guards, a fire protection crew, and some wandering goats that had been left behind by a trailer resident.
One of the things I have a great appreciation for out there is that you were basically looking at people who were past a draft age, so they were middle-aged, and they were doers. They really did a lot of stuff with what they had, and that, when you think about it, you can really get into that. It's really kind of a tribute to those people, what they did.
It was once that I was happy, my life was filled with cheer. I never had seen Hanford till the patrol brought me here. I heard brags about her beauty, pretty girls, and big strong men, rolling plains and majestic mountains, just heaven from end to end. The one thing that is certain, of this there is no denying, the guy that started that noise did a hell of a lot of lying. Deep in the heart of Hanford, there is sand in all we eat. Girls are all bow-legged, the boys all have flat feet. No longer are we religious, we drink, we fight, we curse. No worry about going to hell, it can't be any worse. Still, there is no one to blame but me, the patrol never forgot it. I asked for foreign duty. Believe me, I got it.
Camp Hanford itself may have vanished into history, but its mission lived on. Nuclear power was real, and Hanford became even more important to the security of our nation. Beginning in 1947, and for 11 years that followed, the U.S. government invested more than $1 billion in new construction projects at the Hanford Works project.
From 45, 46, 47, things kind of sat out there. At one of the reports I've read, they said there was a top secret report they'd given to Truman that in 1946 we didn't have enough pieces to have a functioning nuclear weapon. And so it had kind of all been allowed to languish, and when the Russians set off the bomb, that was kind of the call.
An area was needed to house new construction workers. With safety and security reasons making the use of the old Camp Hanford unacceptable, a new location was sought. The small town of Richland was quickly filling up with alphabet-numbered homes, but the need for temporary workers surpassed the pace of construction. A new trailer camp was proposed just 5 miles north of Richland. Unlike the secret Hanford camp, progress of the North Richland camp was announced in full detail by Richland's local newspaper. By January 1948, it was estimated that the camp would house 25,000 people. 10,000 of those would be trailers.
There was a little difference in Camp Hanford attitude versus North Richland. During the Second World War, jobs became pretty plentiful, so it was, you could kind of write your own ticket in a lot of ways. And so these people, some of the people were a little picky. The people that came here that lived in North Richland, they were darn glad that they had jobs. I can remember a guy telling my dad when they were talking about being laid off, my dad said something to me. He said, "Are you going to leave this area, go back to Arkansas?" He says, "No, I'm not going back to Arkansas." He says, "This is the best job I ever had." And he said, "I'm staying right here."
The layout of the camp mirrored its predecessor, with all utilities and amenities provided for $4.20 per week. Most of the trailer occupants made the best of their situation while they waited for a home to become available in nearby Richland. Yards, flowers, and painted fences decorated the newly established camp.
The people in Richland, they looked down their nose at the people in North Richland because they were construction workers. They looked at them as basically gypsies, things like that. But the vast majority of the people who were out there were family people. They were trying to make a living. They were trying to support their family. They wanted the best for their family just like anybody else. And actually, probably more of those people stayed around and actually took over Richland eventually than the people that moved into Richland in the very beginning.
In June 1955, the Richland Villager announced that the North Richland camp would cease to exist and would be turned over to the U.S. Army. The tiny government town of Richland was now a bustling metropolis of nearly 28,000 residents. A modern city had emerged. Tree-lined streets and identical houses lined the once barren desert. Only a few remnants of its past reminded residents of how far they had come. Richland had much to be proud of. Its contributions to the war effort would live on in the history books, while the memory of trailer life could be summed up by a popular saying, "Remember Pearl Harbor, for you can never forget Hanford."
Far over the mountains my pathway did lead. For days I was hauled by a great iron steed. A short run by bus, my trip was complete. I landed in Hanfordtown, all quiet and neat. The barracks enclosed in a wire-fenced lot, a small room with its dresser and cot. With drink, fights, and gambling, and prayers mighty few, this boom town of Hanford was sure something new. People from all walks and stations of life, the unmarried young, the aged husband and wife, the lean Suntown farmer from Arkansas, the preacher and lawyer from old Iowa, the godly and wicked and all in between, coming by car, bus, and trailer are seen. The white, the red, black, and brown. These are the people who make up Hanford Town. Line up at morning, at noon, and at night. Line up in front, and to left, and to right. Line up for paychecks and line up for meals. Line up till you're so tired you rock on your heels. Loneliness, homesickness, worries, and cares drowns in a flood of John Barleycorn's wares. The whiskey and gin and rum bottles clink at 20 a quart or $1 a drink. Flowing bowls bring them an evening of peace, watched by the vigilant DuPont police. Back to the barracks and into a bed, or flop in the gutter and lies as if dead. Off to the job ere the sun's on its way, eating undercooked grub every day. Sex and lovemaking each turn of the street, labor and toil in the cold and the heat. Blizzards and sandstorms and blisters and strains, sage-covered hills and the parched desert's plains. Look them all over and you'll wonder why these old Hanford boomers are.
To better serve Richland residents and in response to the continued growth of our city, Richland Curbside Collection schedule dates change effective January 2021. Garbage and yard collection will be weekly and recycling collection will rotate every other week based on service address location. To view an interactive map of collection schedules, go to the city's website and click on the Solid Waste Collection Calendar. Then click on Interactive Collection Map. Be sure to click OK on Terms of Use. Then enter your address in the upper left corner and hit Return. From here, you will find a description of your address and garbage, yard waste, and recycling days. Recycling is divided between A and B zones. Return to the landing page to view the curbside recycling calendar. This calendar will show you which recycling week you are assigned. For other questions about Richland Solid Waste Utility, visit the city's website or call customer
It stands alone among the sagebrush and the sand, like a fortress against the elements. Its windowless concrete walls reach upward into the desert sky. It was the first, one of 3 built during the war, and one of 9 eventually constructed along a 50-kilometer stretch of the Columbia River known as Hanford. It was referred to as the Pile by its workers and was given an innocuous title of 105B, simply B. But on September 26, 1944, a new science was proven, the world changed, and the atomic era began.